My name is Scott Woolnough, and I work in the Student Success Center as an academic consultant. And I'm here today with Jill Dillon. She's a biology lab assistant and the gross anatomy lab assistant and a key member of the Cougar Cares key contact tracing team. Jill, many members of our campus community, students, staff, faculty, have shown concern over the contact tracing process. Can you walk us through that process a little bit, please?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So what happens is when a student tests positive for COVID, be it here at the health center or off campus, and the Cougar Care team is notified of that positive test, someone from the Cougar Care team reaches out to me as a tracer and passes along their name and phone number and asks me to reach out to them to start the tracing process. The tracing process is exactly as it sounds. I will contact them and I will let them know who I am, that I am trained through the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health to do the tracing, and I ensure them that everything they tell me is kept confidential. I then ask them if they're experiencing any symptoms, and if so, what they are. I share a list of common COVID symptoms with them. Then we go through the process of tracing, meaning trying to locate any potential contacts that they would have had, not only from the minute I'm talking to them, but going back to include 2 days before they tested positive or 2 days before they started to become symptomatic. So what that would mean is if someone tests on a Monday and they get their test result on Tuesday, that they were positive on Monday, I'm going to call them up and ask them for any Misericordia students, staff, or faculty that they would have been in the presence of for 15 minutes or more within 6 feet. And that would be for the 48 hours prior to their positive test result. Anyone that they identify as being in their presence from the Misericordia community would then be considered a contact of theirs. As a positive case, they are a case. Anyone they're in contact with is considered a contact. I would then get the name and number of those contacts and proceed to reach out to them to let them know they have been exposed. Again, I would be very careful to keep all this information confidential. Usually though, what happens amongst our community is when a student tests positive, they immediately text their friends and their roommates, because everybody's aware of what's going on and everybody's on high alert. So it's very rare that I reach out to a contact and they have no idea why I'm calling. That's very rare. The other case would be if the reason the student is getting tested is because they woke up and they have a headache, a low-grade fever, a sore throat, congestion. They decide to go get tested the next day, let's say. So they go to the health center, they get tested. Now, and the following day, they come back positive. So in that case, what I do is, again, I trace back 48 hours, but rather than tracing back 48 hours prior to the day they took the test, I'm tracing back 48 hours prior to the first day of symptoms. So that does get a little confusing as to why some traces are started on one day and some traces are started on another when we have a positive case.
And how quickly does that contact tracing start? For instance, I fill out the Cougar Cares app, the Live Safe app in the morning. How quickly does that contact tracing begin?
Minutes. We try to keep it within minutes because we do acknowledge and respect the fact that, we have to be quick about this. We have to limit the spread. We have to be a part of that. So the sooner we can reach out to the case and find out who their contacts are, the sooner we can get everyone who needs to be in isolation and in quarantine safely in those spaces. And we know that we can help to maintain the spread on our campus.
So you talked about becoming a contact. The criteria for that is within 6 feet, 15 minutes or more, masked or unmasked. Now, I can already hear the campus community hollering, then why do I have to wear a mask then if it doesn't stop me from being a contact? Can you talk a little bit about that, please?
Sure, and you're exactly right. It's not going to prevent you from becoming a contact if you've been within 6 feet of a positive case for 15 minutes or more, even if both of you are wearing a mask. Here at Misericordia University, we are mandating masking out of an abundance of caution. It's just one small thing we can do to slow the spread of this virus. So regardless of both people being masked, one or not, the idea is that that mask is going to serve as a barrier. The less viral load I transmit to you, the less viral load you're able to receive because the mask is doing the job as a barrier. The less viral load you receive, the less sick you're hopefully going to become. That is, again, not a guarantee, but it's the role of the mask and why we're using it.
So it doesn't stop you from becoming a contact, but it can prevent you from obtaining the virus in the first place. And that's kind of, at the end of the day, what we all want to do is we want to avoid this entering our bodies.
Right, that's correct. You're not going to be taken off the contact list because you were wearing a mask while you were around somebody who was positive. But our hope is that it helps prevent you from either receiving the virus, getting the virus, or it means that your symptoms or your illness, should you receive it, are going to be less.
One of the buzzwords that's being utilized is exposure, or oh, I've been exposed. Exactly what does that mean in terms of contact tracing?
So exposure, and we're here at Misericordia University, we're using the same guidelines as what the CDC and the Pennsylvania Department of Health are using regarding exposure. So when we talk about exposure, we mean anyone that you are within 6 feet of for 15 minutes or more. Now, masks are required. They're mandated on this campus. But please keep in mind, if you're wearing a mask, or if you and everyone you're around is wearing a mask, that is a wonderful way to prevent the spread, but it doesn't change the distance nor the length of time.
So the 6 feet, I'm so sorry to interrupt, I apologize. So the 6 feet, 15 minutes is masked or unmasked?
Yes, yes. It's either way. So when we are saying, if I call someone up and say, we have reason to believe you've been exposed to someone who's COVID positive, that means that we have reason to believe that you were within 6 feet of someone who has tested positive. You are within 6 feet of them for 15 minutes or more.
So are you doing only contact tracing on those positive results, or are you doing contact tracing in other ways too?
So we're doing contact tracing on positive results. So if we get a positive case, we reach out to their contacts. From there, we're only tracing people that are positive. Now, if you're a case and someone else is a contact because of them, we may isolate and quarantine, but we're not going to then ask the contact to give us a list of the people they've been in contact with, unless they come up positive when they get tested at a later time.
So you're not doing secondary contacts, you're just doing the initial contacts with the person who tests positive, unless that secondary contact also, and then they become a primary positive case.
They become a case, and then anyone that they've been in contact with is no longer a secondary or peripheral contact, they're now a contact.
So one of the concerns I'm hearing, particularly maybe from students in the dorms, that I was around someone who tested positive. I know they tested positive. Why wasn't I contacted by the Cougar Cares team? Can you address that a little bit?
Sure. So again, whenever we trace a positive case, we're asking them to tell us who they were around. So I have found when that situation happens, that someone says, I was around them and I know that they're positive and I know they're in isolation, but I wasn't contacted. They were not identified by the case as someone that they were around for 15 minutes or more within 6 feet. So if the case identifies a person as being within 6 feet of them for 15 minutes or more, then they're contacted. If they were around them, but they weren't contacted, they weren't identified as meeting those criteria. The other thing that can come into play here is when When were you around them? That would be my next question. Were you around them 3 days before they tested positive, a week before they tested positive? Because if we're only tracing back 48 hours prior to the positive test date or 48 hours prior to the first symptom, if you were around your roommate Friday afternoon and then you went home for the weekend and you didn't see them again, they didn't come back to campus until Wednesday when they tested, then that's, even though you're a roommate, you haven't been around them or exposed to them in the last 48 hours prior to test or symptoms.
One of the things that one of the more confusing aspects of this pandemic and this particular virus is some people are getting quarantined for 10 days and some people are getting quarantined for 14 days. Can you tell us the difference between, I'm going in for 10 days, but my friend's going in for 14, what's the difference?
That's a great question. And it is also a big source of confusion. I get a lot of questions on that. Again, we're going back to a case versus a contact. A case is someone who has been identified and tested as positive. A contact is someone who has been within 6 feet of a positive case for 15 minutes or more. Whenever you are positive, you need to isolate for 10 days. And that's 10 days from the date you took the test in which you came back positive, or 10 days from your first day of symptoms. If you have been identified as a contact of someone who is positive, you will be asked to quarantine for 14 days from your last contact with the positive case, from the last time you were within 6 feet for 15 minutes or more with that positive case. The clock starts on that last date and it is for 14 days. You might test negative. Even if you find out you're a contact, you go get tested, you might test negative, but you still need to quarantine to be sure that you don't come up positive later on in that 14 days.
Now, you use these two terms, isolation versus quarantine. Other than isolation being 10 days, quarantine being 14 days, is there a difference in the procedure in those two words?
Yes, there is. So that also can get a bit confusing. When someone is asked to isolate, it's exactly what it sounds like. You want to isolate yourself from anyone else. You don't want to have any contact with anyone else, and that includes shared spaces. So if you live in a home where you are able to have your own bedroom, your own bathroom, your own kitchen, then you are able to isolate. If you live with others and you share a bathroom, you share a bedroom, or you share a kitchen, then it's not possible to isolate with those other individuals in your home. So when you are asked to isolate, that's exactly what you need to do, is make sure you are not sharing any rooms, living spaces, bathrooms, bedrooms, nothing with them. And you do need to remain masked when you come out. If you do have a situation where you can isolate in your own bedroom and your own bathroom and your own kitchen, if there are others, in the home with you. Quarantining is very similar to what we all did in March and April of 2020, where we all just sort of hunkered down in our homes with our family members and really limited our circles of those we were with. You're not allowed to leave the home you're in, or wherever it is that you're quarantining. You're not permitted to leave. But this is also a situation where you may be quarantining with other people because they're in the same situation that you are. They've been exposed to the same case at the same time, so you're able to quarantine with them. This is where you do want to, again, not leave your home, just like when you're in isolation, and not associate with others. Very similar to what we all were doing in the spring, whenever this all came about. Only there would be no leaving for groceries or anything like that.
So somebody goes into quarantine, and they're serving out, maybe their first week of quarantine. They get tested and they test negative. They still have to finish out their quarantine?
Yes, they do. And the reason for that is because, according to the CDC, there have been contacts, people who have been exposed to a positive person up to 12 days after that exposure that have come up positive. So what they did is they implemented, you know what, we're going to go with 14 days to play it safe. You may not have been in contact with the positive case for 10 days. You may be in quarantine for 10 days and you wake up on the 10th day and say, oh, I've got congestion, I've got a fever, I've got a sore throat. In some people, it takes a little bit longer for the symptoms to present.
I just want to clarify, you were talking about shared spaces, like shared bathrooms, shared kitchens. We're talking about, as far as, in terms of quarantine and isolation, we're talking about any shared space. We're talking about common areas. We're talking about, specifically to the dorms, if we're in a suite situation with 3 separate rooms and that common area with the television, that common area is a shared space.
Correct, correct. So that person would not be permitted in that common area. Really, the only way to isolate is to either live alone or to have a place with your own bedroom and bathroom that's not shared, and kitchen.
This sounds, Jill, like a very, very daunting task to be able to contact trace and keep Misericordia's community safe. And I personally want to thank you for everything the Cougar Cares team is doing. What are the challenges that you're facing, when you're trying to do all these contact tracings?
Well, first of all, thank you. I appreciate that, not only my efforts, but all the tracers and everyone on the Cougar Cares team. I mean, it's a team effort, no doubt about it. It's a team effort. And, it's just one little thing I can do during this time to help. I didn't know what else I could do to help. And that's why I took the course. So regarding the challenges, of course, whenever we call someone up and we say, I need you to remember what you were doing 4 days ago, walk me through your whole day. That's of course a challenge because, when things become mundane and routine, it's easy to forget. It's easy to forget, oh yeah, I did talk to someone in the library, or I did go to a study group, or I went to lunch with someone. It's easy to forget. So of course, there's always the challenge of memory. And it's not uncommon for me to call someone and trace them and get their list of contacts. And then, later that evening or even the next day, I get a text saying, I just remembered something. And so what I try to do is I try to ask the same question regarding their day or who they were around. I try to ask it a couple different ways in the way that I can maybe jog their memory or make them think of something different. I also ask them at the beginning of the call if they want to pull up their calendar, either on their phone, or if they have a desk calendar they use, their schedule. And the other thing too that can be a big help is if they check their social media or their text messages, they can see if they had plans made, during one of the days that we're tracing contacts, or they can see if they took pictures and posted them on Instagram when they went to the sunflower farm or something along those lines. So those can be good resources, and I do ask them to check that as well. But again, it's hard to remember, what we all were doing 4 days ago. So that's one of the challenge. The other one is, the Cougar Care team has a Live Safe app, and it's a wonderful app that we're all asked as faculty, staff, and students to fill out every day. There's a survey. It takes about 15 seconds to fill it out. I find that those who use that app every day are starting to really think about how they're feeling in the morning. When they read down over the symptoms that are listed on that app, are you experiencing any of these symptoms? They tend to think about it a minute. Wait a minute. Is this just a dry throat or is this a sore throat? Do I also have congestion? So I would say another hurdle we have is that those that need to be using the app every day aren't. So that's another one. And of course, probably the biggest hurdle is dismissing symptoms. In the fall of 2019, all these symptoms, if we would have woken up with these things, we wouldn't have given it a second thought. And I'm hearing from so many people, I get seasonal allergies. I just assumed it was my allergies and I went on with my normal day. And then they continue to do that. Maybe the next day they wake up with a different COVID symptom, but assume it's not COVID. Because many times I hear from many students that the symptoms are very minor, and that's wonderful. That's wonderful. We don't want them to be strongly symptomatic. So they think that I can dismiss it because it's a very minor symptom. And then maybe on the 4th day, they'll say, wait a minute, I just lost my sense of taste or my sense of smell. Now we're 4 days into this, and we're tracing not only the past 4 days, but 2 days beyond that. So I would say dismissing symptoms as seasonal allergies or just something else is a huge hurdle. It's 2020 and we're in the middle of a pandemic. We all have to be keenly aware of our bodies, and what you may not have ever gone to see your physician for in years past, you need to now, or you need to at least at minimum get tested at a testing facility if you're having these symptoms.
Being a college student is by nature a social experience. You know, it is. It always has been. It's kind of ingrained in the university culture, and particularly in Misericordia's culture. What recommendations would you give to students, maybe even particularly first-year students that are now coming to college and they're looking for that college experience, but they just can't under a pandemic? And so how would you suggest that they get that college experience in this current pandemic?
Well, the first thing I would suggest is that they be vigilant with washing their hands, wearing their masks, and practicing social distancing. I think too, a good idea is, while we want students to be social and we want them to have that experience, because it is so very important, that they may need to keep their circle of friends a little smaller. And by circle of friends being smaller, I don't mean excluding people, but I'm saying if you keep it within your roommates and your suite mates or those you live in an off-campus apartment with, keep that circle as is. But perhaps as you invite other friends into your social life and into your circles, do that in outdoor spaces. Don't have them in your dorm rooms. Don't have them in your small apartment. Don't have them at a party, but instead go to the outdoor tents, or go to the dining halls where there's plenty of room to space out, or go to a large study room where you can all be spaced out. You can still develop friendships. You can still get to know people, but you don't have to be 6 people crammed in a small dorm room. We want to kind of, still be able to meet people and learn from people, but limit how physically close we are to people. And specifically to first-year students, what I would say to them is, this will end. This will end. And so don't assume that the Misericordia that you're at today is the Misericordia that's going to be, in the fall of 2021. So get to know those people that you're here with, because you've got the next 4 years to be friends with them and a lifetime ahead of that. So know that it will end, and it won't always be like this.
Excellent advice. If students have further questions, maybe there's something, I think we covered a lot of ground today, but if they have further questions that we didn't cover, how can they ask those questions? Did they contact the Cougar Cares team directly, maybe through the app?
Yeah, they could, they could call the Cougar hotline, or they could send an email to cougarcare@misericordia.edu. They will get back to them. They can also contact the health center if they have a specific question about perhaps a symptom they're experiencing. I can try to be as readily available to answer any contact tracing questions. My email is on the website. It's jdillon@misericordia.edu, JDILLON@misericordia.edu. If anyone has a contact tracing question, go ahead and email me, and I'll be happy to answer it either via email, or if you supply a phone number, I can call you and talk to you about that as well.
Jill, thank you so much for your time today. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, this is Jill Dillon, biology lab assistant, gross anatomy lab assistant, and key member of the Cougar Cares contact tracing team. Jill, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to explain and clarify this.
And thank you for everything the Cougar Cares team does.
Thank you.